Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Big rumours emerging at Mercedes. Yes, George Russell just won the Singapore Grand Prix, and with the recent upgrades, maybe further victories could be on the way, but that does not mean that Russell is happy with the contractual situation that Toto Wolff is putting him in. Rumours emerging that Russell even wants Toto to step away from managing him, doesn't believe that Wolff necessarily has his best interest in mind, with the Max Verstappen threat on the horizon. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in a comment. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Plenty we're going to get into today. Wanted to start here again, just another classic McLaren PR stunt, but there's been a lot going on in McLaren over the last couple of days, as we discussed in some detail yesterday, but they've done it again, right? The amount of posts they've done on this victory celebration at the McLaren Technology Centre. It takes a team to win. I mean, you already know without even looking what the top reply is going to be. Yeah, there you go. Just another great example. Now, the big rumour, if you guys didn't see it yesterday, is around the relationship between Zak Brown and Oscar Piastri and the relationship between Zak Brown and Lando Norris. Now, Alex Palou, I discussed this in some detail yesterday, but he kind of followed on really in his assessment that he signs the contract with McLaren. If you guys aren't aware, he was driving an IndyCar. Alex Palou, best IndyCar driver right now, winning all the championships. Driving good Chip Ganassi Racing. He was set to move to McLaren because they said, all right, well, if you join, then we can, try and get you into Formula 1. Now, he believed that that was a genuine admission. I don't imagine he got any of that in writing. And he did break the contract and then went back to Chip Ganassi. So McLaren is suing him for $20 million. And he's saying, look, I don't have that type of money, right? Like, yeah, I've done all right, but I'm certainly not in the position to pay that money back. He said that he'd be paying it for years. First of all, they think that the amount he's getting sued for his lawyers is too high. And secondly, he doesn't think that it's fair because, well, he alleges anyway that Zak Brown was paying Palou's lawyers and Brown knew that he couldn't uphold the contract that he'd signed. So there's all sorts of drama here. Basically, Palou thinks that he signed the contract due to lies from the side of Zak Brown. It's not really painted McLaren's treatment of its drivers in the best light, especially because of all the things Zak Brown has often said about Christian Horner and the way that he makes his drivers feel. It's obviously not great for PR, so I think that's kind of especially why, not just after Singapore, McLaren are on a tirade on that front. But Palou says, I thought I had the right to terminate an agreement that was based on lies and false impressions. At that moment, I either fight with Chip Ganassi Racing, the team who have given me the opportunity to be IndyCar champion, the team, they had all the team around me, or I go and breach a person who has been misleading me and where I have not been having these opportunities. So that drama continues at McLaren. The other thing yesterday was Carlos Sainz. Over the last couple of days, he's made several comments on the quality of the race direction from the broadcasting perspective. Sainz, I think we saw these comments. He said that it's a bit of a trend. I don't want to see the girlfriends and their reactions. I just want to make sure we don't miss any of the racing. Now, I don't know if I shared F1's response. They said this: we always focus on giving the fans the best possible footage of the race and never compromise the key focus, the racing on the track. And I think they even said that their team had done an excellent job at the Singapore Grand Prix weekend. Well, just in that context, I want to just share this with you guys that was doing the rounds today. This is, I'll zoom out, this is Lance Stroll towards the end of the race. He actually made quite a run, and here he is going through turn 14, turn 15, or whatever it is, right at the end of the lap. This is Ocon, and that is Gasly. Ocon and Gasly here are having quite the duel, and Stroll's coming up behind them. They both go into the final couple of corners together, and Ocon goes late on the brakes to try and hold the inside line. And this is a through goes Hamilton-esque overtake here from Lance Stroll. Look at him go. He sends it down the inside. Both of those guys go off the track and he makes the double switchback overtake. No, yeah, was it really an amazing overtake from Stroll? Was it really, unbelievable switchback? At the end of the day, these two guys outbroke themselves and drove off the track. But it was still an entertaining moment, right? I mean, I'd not seen this all week. It's been like a week since the Grand Prix, and now this clip is finally doing the rounds, among many other moments that were missed, right? So, F1 can't pretend that they've done a great job of race direction this season. But let's talk about some of the teams. Ferrari are a key point today, as they always are, not just because of Ferrari, but also because they're lending a car to Cadillac. So Cadillac want to do some testing, right? They want to get the team out there for a TPC test, get the headsets on, get the drivers in the car, but they don't have a car, right? Cadillac are just joining F1, so they have no previous car to test. So they're borrowing Ferrari's old car. Ferrari are going to get paid some money, presumably, and they're going to go borrow that one instead. They're giving Cadillac the power for 2026 and beyond, for at least the next couple of years. So makes sense. It's an understandable relationship. But some other teams aren't so happy with this, and like there'll always be complaints. Like Cadillac, welcome to F1, right? Like you try and do anything, someone's going to complain about it, and other teams are going to say, look, hang on a second, how come they're allowed to borrow a car? They might gain something from that. They might learn about the Ferrari. That's unfair. But the regulations will say, well, you guys can feel free to test your old cars and they can't do anything. Doesn't seem too fair to me, especially because it's not like Cadillac are going to be that good anyway, are they really? So at least initially, I don't expect this will be too much of a big deal. Alpine apparently are getting very close to making their decision on their second driver. We know that Gasly is confirmed, locked in for the next couple of years. Rumour has it that based on recent performances, Colapinto certainly has increased his chances. There was talk for some time about Yuki, maybe a Tsunoda-Gasly partnership again, but I think Colapinto's done well enough and has, apart from Baku, at least not crashed that much and has made some decent moves. And look, the car's terrible, so what can you say? The reality is he's done pretty well against Gasly in recent rounds, and as a result it feels more likely that Briatore will keep him around, but until the decision is final and made, and even when it is, you wouldn't necessarily say anything for certain. The other big rumour today was around Gabriel Bortoleto and what his future might look like. So currently driving with Sauber, they are powered by Ferrari. We know that next year it's going to be Audi. Now Bortoleto's done a great job this season. He outqualified Hülkenberg until Singapore like 7 times or something in a row. Yeah, Hülkenberg had that amazing podium back in Silverstone, but apart from that, Bortoleto has done a sensational job, especially in qualifying against a driver who's known in Hülkenberg for his qualifying prowess. He's had a few difficult moments this season, all the rookies have, but if you wanted to rank the rookies of the season, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of these rookies have been extremely impressive this year, and Bortoleto is certainly right in that category. According to rumours, though, there is interest from Ferrari, because Ferrari have a lot of questions to answer. First of all, why is their car terrible now compared to where it was last year? But also, what do they do in the immediate term? And also, from especially 2027, right? We know that Hamilton intends to stay for a good few years to come, but at least for the next couple of years. I think when Hamilton joined, we kind of expected maybe 3 years of Hamilton with Ferrari. This will be year 1. He probably looks to stay for 26 and 27. That's a possibility. But Charles Leclerc, it's not so sure anymore, right? Hamilton's won his championships. Charles Leclerc, if they don't deliver in 2026, all signs point to Leclerc considering options elsewhere. And frankly, his management team already is. It's just a matter of whether Ferrari deliver, because if Ferrari bottle it in 2026 and it looks like they're just going backwards, Leclerc, just as much as he would love to, I just don't think he can logically stay when he wants to seek a title, right? As a result, Ferrari have to have an eye on what they could do next, and apparently Bortoleto is an option. If he does well in Audi next year, of course he's done well in Sauber this year with Ferrari power, it is plausible that in 2027, Bortoleto is a key target. But then, of course, Ollie Behrman should also be in the conversation as well, right? He's going to be driving the Haas this year and next year as well. That will both be Ferrari powered. I think many kind of expected, including myself, that maybe Behrman would be the next up, given he's also a Ferrari Driver Academy driver. So there could be an interesting battle there to keep an eye on next year between which two of those guys in their second year are more impressive. Is it Bortoleto at Audi? Is it Behrman at Haas? And whichever one of those is more impressive maybe is the number one option potentially to come into Ferrari when the time comes. And the time may well come with their current struggles. There's also been lots of talk about Christian Horner. This was Johnny Herbert's perspective on it. Their prime target has to be Christian. The team has all the ingredients they need, but they haven't been able to put them together. He actually followed on and said, the drivers are not the issue, it's the car that lacks speed. They still haven't managed to attract the kind of people they need to truly build a competitive machine. They're missing a leader. Management must be able to attract the right person and give them the freedom to do what they want. I know Vasseur recently signed a new contract, but if things start badly next year, something will have to change. I think Johnny Herbert's pretty on the money here. Whether Horner is the man that they would want or would go for, or would they be willing to give up the level of control that Horner would desire, that is a very different question. The other couple of things on Ferrari are just how their car hasn't gone anywhere, right? I think we expected Ferrari had some changes that they made mid-season. Certainly the rear suspension, but if anything, their problems now are worse than they were at the start of the season. We know at the start of the year they were struggling with ride height issues. Those haven't gone away. They thought the rear suspension might resolve that. It hasn't. Obviously, China was the classic example of managing to get disqualified, right? Since then, they've had to be far more reserved, and it's meant that their car cannot perform where they expected it to. But those aren't the only issues, right? Like the heating, the cooling, let's say, the heating up of the brakes, among other things. Singapore, yeah, it's pretty heavy on the brakes, given the nature of the circuit and the nature of some of those long straights, especially the new straight after they got rid of the section under the bridge. But you're still not expecting the brakes to fail on you, right? That's what happened to Hamilton at the end of the Grand Prix. Leclerc says, these are the years I feel at my best. I don't see the sunset of my career yet. I don't expect that to come anytime soon. But I feel very young, but these are certainly very important years, and it will be equally important to start off on the right foot next year. So again, I think every comment from Leclerc and his team is pointing in a particular direction. And as I got to this point when the other teams have made so much progress, right? McLaren haven't done that much since the start of the year. They have made some progress with their car, but I think the two teams to really look at, maybe even Aston Martin you could throw into the conversation to an extent, but it's certainly Mercedes and Red Bull, right? Red Bull are the notable one because they have brought some sort of upgrade almost every single race this season. They've brought an upgrade, Red Bull, for the last 8 Grand Prix in a row. Of those 8 Grand Prix, Ferrari have brought changes to 4 of them, McLaren have brought changes to 4 of them, Mercedes have brought changes to 5 of them. Red Bull are doing something every round, but Singapore saw a new front wing for Mercedes. And Juliana here goes into some detail on what changed and why this seems to be helping the top teams. So we know that flexi wings are now officially back on the agenda. There was also talk about flexi wings coming into this season because Red Bull were not so, let's say, pushing in that direction. Other teams were. They wanted the FIA to clamp down on it. They eventually said that they would, but it would take them a few rounds. We know that the Spanish Grand Prix this year, they officially put the new regulations into place that meant brand new rear wings, or front wings, and rear wings technically, but front wings especially needed to be generated, where they would not be allowed to flex as much under the static load testing. There's actually a graphic here in the article that describes the changes that were made at the time. So this was very important. It didn't make like an overnight crazy difference to the pecking order of the championship, but this was a substantial change in the way that teams approach things, because the flexi wings were kind of considered to be, if there is a silver bullet in this regulations, it is the front wing, for the reason that these cars tend to, because they have so much downforce at high speed, they tend to oversteer at high speed but understeer at low speeds, because also they're very heavy. So the flexi wing at lower speeds would generate you more downforce, therefore giving you better turning for the corner, and at high speed it would kind of back off on the front wing, so you'd get a bit less front downforce, which would control some of the oversteer. Not the only benefit of the flexi wings, but they were kind of like the key thing that was holding these regulations together, in terms of allowing the cars to be set up for multiple different corner types and not have to compromise too much. As soon as the flexi wing changes happens, it was notable for Mercedes and other teams that they had to compromise a lot on corner types, and Mercedes therefore became pretty much only good at the circuits where the corners are just the same, and that was the case in Canada. Now, things have changed, because over the last few months, Mercedes and Red Bull have put a lot of work. I mean, we know that every week, pretty much, Red Bull are bringing a new front wing, or a new floor piece or something. And it's true for Red Bull and it's true for Mercedes that they've both pushed quite heavily again in this direction of flexibility, because if you use special materials, which apparently is what Mercedes have done, they've created a new way with materials and with design ideas to have it flex strategically under certain loads so that it passes the new tests, but it still does effectively what it used to when it's actually out on the track. And this is where Mercedes have spent their time, right? And this is also where it seems Red Bull have spent much of their time as well. Whereas Ferrari, they took a different approach, right? They've not really thought too much about changing that flexibility of the wing. They focused more on the rear suspension. they made some changes there, but it didn't do anything, right? So I think that's kind of the critical takeaway from this, is that Red Bull and Mercedes have made massive progress in their aero research, in their flexi-wing research, and now we're seeing the dividends of that pay off. Whereas Ferrari, they went a different way and it didn't work. So maybe they thought, oh, they're clamping down on flexi wings now, so we can stop thinking about that. But actually, in F1, that is not usually the case. And it's plausible that flexi wings, I mean, flexi wings are always relevant, right? So next year, they will also be a topic of conversation. But speaking of Mercedes, we've got to discuss a little bit on George Russell, because it is nonetheless surprising that having won in Canada, having won in Singapore, he's still not got a contract for next year. Now, George has been told by Toto, and Toto's even told us publicly, that, yeah, George is going to be a driver for us next year. Kimi's going to be a driver for us next year. That shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. But the terms of that type of deal, why it's taken so long, and really whether George believes that Toto is the right man for the job is also a good question. Now, I think both driver and team principal here are doing what makes sense in their interest. George should continue at Mercedes, obviously. Toto knows that. But also for Toto, if Max is interested in joining, especially for 2027, it would be probably unwise to give George or Kimi probably a particularly longer term deal. But the rumour is that George isn't very happy about this, and I can understand it, right? Like, George probably feels like, look, I've driven just as well as Max has this year. And that is a controversial assessment. You know, I still think Max has been the driver of the season, but only marginally, I think, over George. They've both been excellent with the machinery that they've had. But I think George could reasonably credibly say to Toto, like, look, Max is, you know, I've been just as good as Max, right? That's what George will think in his head. You know, at the end of the day, maybe that's even true this season. Let's say that you believe that it is. He's not a four-time world champion, whereas Max is. So that's always going to be a bit of an issue for George. And yeah, it's tough if you're Russell, isn't it, right? Like, you're in this situation where, yeah, you've been phenomenal, but it still might not be quite good enough. And as a result of that, there's a rumour from Ralf Schumacher. Now, again, this is coming from Ralf Schumacher, right? So take it as you will, because sometimes he does talk a load of rubbish. But he does say here that rumour has it, based on what he's heard behind the scenes. And look, Toto, Mercedes, obviously Toto's Austrian, but Mercedes, German organisation, there's German people at the top. Maybe Ralf Schumacher knows something about it. He says that rumour has it Russell no longer wants Toto as an advisor. So we know that Toto is kind of the manager and advisor of several drivers, right? And obviously for Ocon, for example, was the case as well, and kind of allowed him to explore opportunities. Same thing is true for Mick Schumacher, right? So there's a few drivers in that kind of position. And apparently George is not very keen on this any longer. And I can also understand it if I'm George, right? Because you're having these negotiations with Toto. It's pretty clear that he is putting Mercedes' goals absolutely at the pinnacle, which is, of course, what he should do. He is an owner, shareholder of that team. Maybe Russell, though, feels like, look, if you're going to be advising me, if you're going to be managing me and my contract situation, then there's a bit of a conflict of interest here in terms of what I actually want and what you want. So, look, there might not be any bad blood here precisely, but I think it's definitely possible that Russell will want to have a slightly more black and white relationship with Toto than has been the case over the last couple of years. So where this goes next, intrigued to your thoughts as ever in the comments below. I think we will get an update on the contract soon. There will be something signed. Russell will get locked in. But it has been a pretty controversial few months here for Russell and Toto, and I don't think their relationship will necessarily be the same once we come out the other side. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.